So a truly stunning discovery has just ripped open a very dark chapter of World War II history. It's exposing secrets that have been buried for decades inside one of the world's most famous banks. We're going to get into what they found and the incredible fight to bring it all into the light.
It really all comes down to this one number, 890. A figure that just sent absolute shockwaves through the entire international financial world.
That's right, 890 accounts, all with potential ties to the Nazi regime, just uncovered, decades after everyone thought this was all settled. And honestly, the details get even more disturbing.
I mean, get this. Some of these accounts weren't just old dusty records. They were active. They stayed open until just a couple of years ago. So the big question is, how on earth could something like this go unnoticed for so long? Okay, so how did all this even come out? Well, this wasn't some simple clerical error. Not at all. This was the result of a really dedicated investigation that was kicked off by the Simon Wiesenthal Center back in 2020. And what they found was a trove of information that had never been seen before. And the connections here are just chilling. We are not talking about a few low-level people. The review found evidence of accounts for the Nazis' paramilitary SS, their wartime foreign office, and even accounts that were linked to a whole scheme to help Nazis escape to Argentina after the war.
But look, these revelations did not come easily. Credit Suisse didn't just, volunteer this information. It actually took years of constant pressure from a bipartisan group of U.S. senators who just refused to let this issue get swept under the rug. And this timeline really shows you just how hard it was to get to the truth. It all started with a tip in 2020. An independent ombudsperson, a guy named Neil Barofsky, was brought in to oversee things. But then things took a really weird turn. Barofsky was suddenly terminated, and his report was completely buried. It took a historic step, the Senate Budget Committee issuing its first subpoena in over 30 years to finally start prying some answers loose.
And this was a truly bipartisan effort, which is pretty rare these days. You had Republican Senator Chuck Grassley and Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse working together side by side. They said they were driven by an obligation to pursue justice for Holocaust victims and their families.
But, as the U.S. Senate started digging deeper, a really disturbing pattern started to emerge. It began to look like the bank's own internal review wasn't just incomplete, it seemed like it was being actively obstructed from the inside.
Which brings us to another staggering number, 64,000. So what in the world does this represent?
Well, according to the Senate Committee's findings, 64,000 sets of potentially relevant records were, for some reason, excluded from the bank's own forensic review. That is a massive amount of information that was just left out.
I mean, the question is just unavoidable, isn't it? Why? Why would those records be withheld? Why would an independent ombudsperson and a historian be blocked from getting to these critical materials?
The contrast here is just so stark. On one hand, the bank promised a thorough, independent, and transparent review. On the other hand, the Senate investigation found the complete opposite, a review that was hampered by restrictions, where key investigators were blocked from getting information and the lead ombudsperson was just abruptly fired.
Now, to really grasp why this discovery is so huge today, we kind of need to rewind and understand the critical role that neutral Switzerland and its banks played during World War II. So what exactly was Nazi gold? I mean, it wasn't just the state treasuries of countries they conquered. No, it was this systematic plundering of the wealth of millions of ordinary people. We're talking stolen life savings, jewelry, wedding rings, and in the most horrific cases, even gold fillings taken from the victims of the Holocaust. All of it was melted down and used to finance the Nazi war machine. And a landmark U.S. government report from 1997 basically concluded that Switzerland was the principal banker for the Nazis. They handled enormous sums of gold and currency that helped keep the Third Reich's war machine going.
And the story doesn't even end with the war. The investigation is now looking into a really chilling post-war chapter, whether Credit Suisse accounts were used to support the Rat Lines, a whole network of escape routes that helped high-ranking Nazis flee Europe and completely evade justice.
So, where does all this leave us? Well, in 2023, Credit Suisse was bought by its longtime rival UBS. And now, the responsibility for confronting this dark legacy rests squarely with them.
And to their credit, it seems like UBS has moved to get this investigation back on track. They've rehired Neil Barofsky, the very same ombudsperson who was fired, and according to insiders, they've provided seemingly unlimited resources to finally conduct the thorough and complete review that was promised all those years ago.
So what's next? The path forward is pretty clear. The investigation has to finish its review of all 890 accounts. It has to fully investigate the bank's ties to those Nazi rat lines. And most importantly, it needs to deliver a final public report with no spin. The world is definitely watching.
Because ultimately, this isn't just about bank ledgers and old historical documents. It's about a moral obligation. It's about providing answers and some measure of justice for the last remaining Holocaust survivors and for the families of the millions who perished.
Which really just leaves us with a final, very difficult question. As we uncover these painful truths so many years later, with so few survivors left to even see it, what does justice truly look like?